Representative Andrew Barkis, we've had him on the show a few times during the legislative session, and typically to talk about rent control and housing issues because he has an interesting perspective. He's a landlord, and so he's vehemently opposed to things like rent control, and he's been fighting hard all session to try to get that bill stopped. Of course, Democrats did push through a version of rent control that basically says rent increases are capped at 7% a year plus inflation up to 10%. And what's going to happen? We all know what's going to happen. Landlords are just going to increase rent 10% every single year. We're waiting to see if Governor Bob Ferguson is going to sign it. But I'll say, we had to have Andrew on because his last speech he gave on rent control on the floor I was so sad watching it because you could just tell that he just had done everything he could. There was nothing else he could say to stop it from happening, and he was utterly defeated.
Madam Speaker, I know this is going to come a shock to you, but I don't have a lot more to say on this policy that we're going to vote on right now. It's interesting to me, Madam Speaker, that in the last several years, you and I have worked on a lot of housing issues. I referenced that before. We started kind of down the path when you were a chair of a different committee on landlord-tenant issues. I remember some of our very first conversations and debates trying to do what was the right thing. But it's interesting to me that this year's top priority, the number one bill of the session, the very first day of session in committee, was a bill that's going to do more harm for supply and more harm for tenants than good. The data is right in front of us. The other body worked on a product that we negotiated here in good faith and sent to them. And they boldly tried to fix some things that just maybe would have made this a little bit better. But after that, we couldn't wait to get it back here to strip all that away. I'm concerned about some potential constitutional defects in the very process that brings the bill to us today. The only real predictability that tenants in Washington State are going to have is the assurance that their rent is going to go up 10% a year, year over year. Madam Speaker, I've been in the industry doing this for 30 years. I think I have a pretty strong point of reference when it comes to working with housing providers and tenants. Madam Speaker, I'm concerned about the other 85% that have rent increases of less than 5%. So, congratulations. You did it. You passed your priority bill of the session. We're about to.
Oh, poor guy. I feel so bad for him. He's totally defeated. Maybe not totally defeated. I know he's not giving up the fight, but Representative Andrew Barkis joins us today to talk about, rent control in that speech, but also the bullying, literal bullying happening behind the scenes on the Democratic side to guilt Democratic lawmakers who were holdouts on rent control to vote for it. Representative Barkis, welcome back to Undivided.
Good morning, Brandi. Always a pleasure and honor to be on your show and to talk to you. And I'll just start by thanking you for everything you've done to share our message and get the word out on a daily basis. Your voice has been just so important to everything that we have been doing.
See, why can't everyone compliment me like that at the start of an interview? Why can't everyone ingratiate themselves to me?
It's true. I tell you, I mean, you can't imagine, but how many people say, hey, I heard on Brandi this. She's talking about this. Are you guys doing this? I'm like, yeah, that's what we're doing. So, we just haven't had a platform like yours, I think, ever. I mean, we've had some great people over the course of time, but having a dedicated platform of you putting the information out for people has been critically important. And I think it helped with the participation of people this year in the session by participating in the process. So
well, that makes me happy. That makes me happy. I know we had a lot of people sign up and gave them some easy ways to weigh in. But this isn't about me, although I love it. I love it. Great. Now I know who to have on when I need a little pick-me-up. Right. All right. But on a more depressing note, we played your floor speech on rent control. You seemed utterly over it and exhausted.
Well, the exhaustion is definitely real. I feel it today. It'll take a while to recover, physically, mentally, spiritually. The whole thing session. This especially this year was really bad. I think it was really telling that, and I said this, in a time when we're talking about housing problems, crisis, whatever you want to talk about, the fact that we started this year as with the number one priority in housing to be rent control. Day one, the hearing, all the process, right? And when we should be talking about supply. And so the work that was done as this bill moved through the process with the House, negotiations we did, stripping away stuff, the great work the Senate did. I mean, some bold members of the Senate, Senator Cleveland, and others who really stuck it out there to hang the things that made it palatable. And then the fight at the end in the conference. We had that one last chance. We had the votes, and they just peeled off the votes one by one, probably in the most brutal way I've ever seen. I mean, talking to my colleagues about what they went through to vote no was amazing. And yeah, at the end, after all that work, and you think you're there and you think you might stop it, and there it is, and it's the final day, the final vote. It was, I wouldn't say that we were completely defeated, because I think we did do some good things, but the overall defeat, knowing how detrimental this policy is going to be for Washington State, it makes absolutely no sense that we passed this. And history will show we're going to come back. It's going to be a mess like every other state that's done this. And they're going to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe rents have gone up. Well, of course they have. They're going to go up to that percent year after year after year.
Is that what you'll do? Because you are a landlord, correct? And so do you anticipate passing 7% plus inflationary costs along to your renters?
We're going to have, I'm back here in my office, first time, and everybody was like, oh, who are you? When I walked in today. I haven't been here in a long time. We have to really evaluate, and we're working to preserve housing providers. They're leaving. We're trying to keep them here. So we have to help navigate them through. But they're also seeing that and going, well, geez, if I can't raise my rent for this amount of time and I can't do this and all these other taxes went up, yeah, what's the maximum again? It's this, raise it to that. We have this very in-depth process where we evaluate, we do market research, and we talk to the owner. We would call you up and say, hey, this is what it is. This is what we recommend. Some owners would say no, some would say yes. It's none of what you've heard by the talking heads on the opposite side of this issue. It doesn't happen that way, right? And so it will make the process very easy, Brandi, because it probably will go up to whatever that max is. That's the problem when you do price fixing, when you do this type of market influencing. You're not allowing the market to work.
Yeah, you're hedging your bets, and basically, well, if I've got some massive cost increase next year, I might not have it this year, but I've got to hedge my bets and do that. I want to read between the lines of something you just said. We know things got really nasty and brutal on the Senate side when Democratic State Senator Annette Cleveland introduced the amendment to sort of lift it to 10%, soften it a little bit. I can't even imagine how she was treated behind the scenes by her own caucus, but you had mentioned, they were picking off members one by one. I mean, so you're basically saying the Democratic caucus was what, bullying? Brutalizing people into changing their vote?
I think bullying is an accurate term. I mean, it's the way the majority works. It's very different than what it used to be there. And when I have a lot of friends, I work bipartisan. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. And, when they're coming to my office telling me that they can't take this vote anymore and they can barely even say why, that they were pulled back into some office and told, this is how you're going to vote or else. Annette Cleveland lost her, I think, her chair, her caucus position. They forced her to resign. I mean, they'll strip your committees from you. I mean, it's unbelievable that's how they are in order to get what they want. And I don't remember that. I remember in my almost 10 years, I mean, you had a sense of independence. Yes, you could get the pressure put on you, but in the end of the day, you're an independent actor. You're a representative for your constituents, your district, first and foremost. And, I've taken some hard votes. I've been counseled, but I've never had a boot put on me to say, you will vote this way. Our caucus doesn't work that way. You could see it because when you are vote counting and you know you have X amount, and then all of a sudden you're talking to the stakeholders and it goes from 14 to 12 to 9 to 8 to 7, and you're done. You just have no more votes.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it play out on the floor of the Senate when they were voting on that amendment to increase it to 10%. I mean, Senator Jamie Peterson was literally hovering over members. Are you going to vote the way we want you to vote? And I had a lot of people talk to me about how intimidating it looked just watching it. So it's wild.
The same thing on the floor. I mean, Speaker Jenkins was out on the floor. Representative Leavitt, 28, she's been a solid no the whole time. The board was held open. It came down to 1 or 2 votes in the end. The speaker was on her desk. On her desk, the board was held open. Rep. Shavers went yes, and he held it. And then it was a trade. And then she went no, and then he was no, and then he went yes. So it was a trade. You could see the dynamics, and her head was down on her desk. And I just look at that, I'm like, wow. You think about the other work that these representatives have done on both sides, the good policy, the good things that we do. And then to be treated like that over something like this, when you're not allowed to voice your opposition to something where you truly feel and know that it's not the right policy.
It's insane, intense and insane. No allowance for independent thought or anything like that. Do you believe that Governor Ferguson will veto this or sign it?
This is a tough one because I think that, I worked with his office through this. I can tell you that the staff that I worked with, they did not like this policy. They knew of its challenges. They were advocating for the changes that came through. I think the fact that everything was stripped back out could play in. It's a pretty tight bill, and that we don't have a line item veto in the state of Washington. You have to veto the whole thing or sections, right? There could be some stuff done, which throws it back to the drawing board. But it's just it's hard to tell. I mean, he's gonna be faced with a lot of decisions on things he has to do, especially with the operating budget and the taxes and everything else that he's been very vocal about not supporting what the final outcome of the operating budget was.
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to give him credit now because I mean, if he's celebrating that, we dropped it from 12 billion to 9.5 billion in new taxes, and it's like, no, that's not a win. That's not fiscal conservatism in any sense.
It's just they instead of having one major tax, they found 15 smaller ones that spread it out. And in listening to Senator Peterson, James Peterson's talk and justifying this, again, it's for the kids, it's for school, it's for the baloney. They made more cuts in programs that we argued against all over the place that are critical programs, and they're doing budget savings of 10 million, whatever, and then increasing it over on the back side of it. So the operating budget is a mess, and it does increase spending by like 7%. It's the highest budget, and again, to put it in perspective, back in 2017, first budget was like $32 billion. This one's almost $80 billion in a very short period of time. So
crazy. Let's end with this. There was, I think, some misinformation going around that you voted for all the new taxes, which isn't true. You did, however, work on the transportation budget. So it's my understanding. So people understand this process. You got a bunch of different bills and some of them tax bills that make up the budget, right? That support this sort of budget number. So you did not vote for the gas tax, but you did vote for the overall transportation budget. So isn't that the same thing or no?
No.
Okay.
No, because I mean, the biggest difference is, and I was explaining this. So I'm the ranking member on transportation. I start day one. I'm in part of the budget cabinet. I work side by side with my Democrat counterpart, Chair Fye. We go through the whole budget, the entire process, projects, state patrol, everything. Hundreds and hundreds of hours, right? So I'm involved in the decision-making process of how we make cuts, how we keep projects going, how we prioritize, all that stuff. We knew going into this, we didn't have the revenue to accomplish what we need to accomplish to keep things moving. Very, very challenging because there are projects all over, like in Lewis County and other areas where major development is contingent on this. Huge economic development, jobs, for these communities, right? So I work to find every bit of existing revenue in the budget as it exists. I work to find ways to reprioritize. At the end of the day, the Democrats put forth new revenue, the gas tax. I argued against it and I voted against it. But my job, Brandi, is to write that budget and to appropriate the revenues that have been provided for. And I felt I did it in the best possible way for Washingtonians, the best, most fiscal conservative way to keep things moving. I'm proud of that work. And the difference between the operating budget, which I've never voted yes on the operating budget, is because the Republicans are not in the room at all during the process of writing the operating budget. Yeah. That is a partisan majority run show. Transportation has never been that way. We work together. So there's a responsibility and everything else along that. It was, and many of my colleagues voted yes, some voted no. I think I articulated that well, but there is confusion. And I just wanted to state on the record, I didn't vote for a single tax this year, bar none, period.
Yeah. And I just want to end with this, because Bob Ferguson has sort of hinted at or been wishy-washy that on his support of the increased gas tax. So we'd be looking at a 6-cent per gallon increase starting July 1st.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this because I don't want it either, but if any new tax could be justified, I guess it would be the gas tax, only in the sense that there are so few revenue sources available for transportation projects. You can't pull money from just anywhere, right? So one, do you think he'll veto that? And two, if he does, doesn't that throw the entire transportation budget out the window?
He could veto it very well, because it is in addition to all the other taxes, right?
Yeah.
It would definitely throw us in a bind. I think we would be okay to get through between now and when we come back in January. We do what's called a supplemental budget in the odd years or even years. So we would have to readjust and look for alternate. There's only two ways you do this. You stop projects, you cut funding to State Patrol, you cut funding here and there to essential services, or you increase revenue. And so, we did pause a lot of projects. We reprioritized. We've still got the culvert thing hanging over us, and we've got all these other things we've got to deal with. Ferries, we're going to get the bid. We'll have to talk about this when this comes out. Mm-hmm. We're going to get the bid in May for ferries. I'm scared to death what that number's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be crazy. So we'll see. We did well in the way we put this together to get through this period. Mm-hmm. It's the out years that are going to be very challenging.
Yeah. Well, and here's the solution. You take money from the stupid Climate Commitment Act and you allow that to go toward transportation projects. And
Amen.
It's done. Amen.
Amen. I mean, I believe it. I mean, I referenced that again. I was able to move several $100 million around in there that people don't know how we did, but I did that. But I also had my bill that said, give us, reframe that whole thing. I'm not done with that argument. I'm going to come back again on that again next year.
Yeah. All right. Representative Andrew Barkis, get some rest, sir. We appreciate you coming on and explaining to us what's going on. And I just hope beyond hope that Bob Ferguson vetoes rent control, if not for anything else other than maybe a selfish political purpose of his campaign promise to build more housing. So, all right,
well,
sir.
Let's see what he does, and we'll reconvene and talk about it.
Okay, great. All right, appreciate it.
All right, take care, Brandi.
Thank you to Representative Andrew Barkis for coming on, talking to us about rent control, what he's likely to do as a landlord, and I think this is what we're going to see. I don't know how long it will take if Bob Ferguson signs this for us to truly understand the impact of rent control. I mean, I think you'll have developers who immediately decide to turn their focus elsewhere, and then people are going to realize pretty quick that they're seeing exactly a 10% increase in their rent every single year when they otherwise maybe weren't seeing those types of increases so consistently. So a reminder that our weekly housing segment during the session has been brought to you by the Rental Housing Association of Washington. If you're a landlord, now's a really good time to make sure that you have the power of RHA in your corner. They can help you navigate these strange, uncertain times and are definitely down in Olympia trying to advocate, as I'm sure they are right now with the governor, trying to advocate on your behalf and get him to veto that bill. RHAWA.org, RHAWA.org.